The self-healing factor is constantly fighting against the toxin, but it is obviously not something that can be broken off in a short while. The golden light flickered all over Jimmy's body, and the super armor had appeared, but even the super armor couldn't break free. Looking at the poisonous claw that was getting closer and closer to him, Jimmy could no longer care about his fear of insects. Jimmy loves life very much, and most people can't understand this feeling. It's really good to be alive. People, when they are not at their limit, never know how great their potential can be. The golden light flickering around him began to slowly disappear. All the energy dispersed and entered Jimmy's body. The energy of energy everywhere in the world seemed to be fatally attracted at this moment, and began to swarm towards a certain place. What? After Nian Qi joined the battlefield, the self-healing factor plus Nian Qi quickly defeated the toxins in the body. Not only that, Jimmy's strength and speed have risen a lot. And this process is only reflected in a few seconds. What? The big drink before was because of the nonsense after the breakthrough. The screaming now is actually a real pain. Even if this process only lasted less than 10 seconds. However, it was enough for the caveman to come to Jimmy and deliver what he thought was a fatal blow. A pair of sharp poisonous claws suddenly appeared from behind Jimmy. Jimmy let out a miserable scream. However, it's not fatal, and it doesn't even take Jimmy out of combat. The abilities of mutants do not need to be cultivated, but they need to be continuously developed. And Jimmy's self-healing factor has reached level 3 since the moment he stepped out of the Rocky Mountains. And now, it has steadily reached the 4th level. Jimmy's impromptu breakthrough was not due to will. Although a firm will can break out a powerful fighting force at the moment of life and death. However, it is impossible to get all-round strengthening. The reason why Jimmy was able to break through was because Jimmy used an ability that could only be used 3 times in a lifetime. Wake. Every fighter will master this skill, and at the same time, every fighter will also use this bug-like ability in 3 different periods. Those 3 periods were when fighters became Sonda, when Sonda became Wuji, and when Wuji became Jiwawang. And now, Jimmy is using this ability. The majestic force of the cave demon pinned Jimmy to the ground. Looking at Jimmy half kneeling on the ground, the audience below exploded. Bastard. My money. Stand up. What are you doing there? Although all kinds of voices made Jimmy stand up, they were in a commanding tone. This is the essence of the devil's arena. His whole body was covered with sticky spider webs, and his body was completely penetrated by a pair of poisonous claws. Now Jimmy, no matter who is looking at it, will feel that Jimmy can't stand up. But, this is Jimmy. It's Wolverine. The self-healing factor has reached level 4, except for the absence of adamantium. There is no slight difference from Uncle Wolf in his peak period. Don't talk about this kind of injury. Uncle Wolf has suffered more serious injuries than this more than once. With his hands on the powerful pair of poison claws, Jimmy smiled. What? The blood of cave-dwelling demons is not only poisonous, but also highly corrosive, so if one fights with cave-dwelling demons at such close range, one's body will naturally be stained with the blood of cave-dwelling demons. However, Jimmy didn't care. Such corrosive damage wouldn't appear on Jimmy's body for even 3 seconds. What? Right, that is it. You are the best. I'll pay 200 million. Seeing Jimmy on the stage counter-attacking Jedi, the audience off the court completely erupted. From coming on stage to now, Jimmy has performed the routine of wanting to promote before suppressing with great effort. It's different from those who understand the rules here and deliberately create effects. Jimmy, this is a true character show. Jimmy is really afraid of spiders. For life, Jimmy is true love. So, at this moment, this life and death struggle, which is so pretentious, has achieved incredible results. After about 3 minutes of crazy output, Jimmy let go of the cave demon who had lost his breath of life. Jimmy's condition was not much better. He stood up slowly, and the headlights above the ring instantly focused on Jimmy. Let all the demons see Jimmy's distress. However, this will not affect these audiences from hell in the slightest. The tattered clothes and what could be called a pretty face did not weaken Jimmy's charm in the slightest. It seems that, vaguely, it also gives people a different style. Hearing the tsunami-like voice below, a helpless wry smile appeared on Jimmy's face. It wasn't what Jimmy wanted, though, and it felt good. Lowering his head, he inadvertently glanced at the cave-dwelling demon who had lost his breath of life. Yuck. The meal I ate before going on stage, at this moment, was returned to the devil arena. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. These audiences from hell saw this scene and burst out laughing. Boom. At this time, the big iron gate of the arena was also opened. The two devil girls picked up the boxing suit that Jimmy had dropped on the ground before, put it on Jimmy's body, and took Jimmy away from here. It's not the way to the manor. Jimmy is not a road idiot, so he naturally remembers that this is the residence of the demon who wrapped his body under the cloak he saw that day. Jimmy didn't ask why he was going. Maybe everyone should go to see the devil after the end, right? In short, Jimmy is very obedient. Soon, Jimmy saw this mysterious demon for the first time. Hello, dear Mr. Wolverine. This time they met, the mysterious demon seemed very cordial. When Jimmy saw this, a flash of understanding flashed in his eyes. You performed quite well today, so you can make a request that is not excessive. I need a pair of scissors. Jimmy heard the words and said without hesitation. Although this long hair is not easy to raise, it is even more difficult to take care of it. Although Jimmy is very satisfied with his hairstyle now, Jimmy decided to cut it off. Here, Jimmy doesn't have so much free time to take care of the shawl hair. Oh. That's really not a good suggestion, but it's not too much, so, as you wish. After getting what he wanted, Jimmy left under the leadership of the devil girl. There is no point in flirting with this demon at all. Although this demon treated him pretty well, Jimmy knew very clearly that this was the factor that could bring him enough benefits. Otherwise, what everyone eats every day is a good testimony. Everyone here, facing these demons, has no rights at all. The so-called request is just to make myself and others work better for him. On the way back to the manor, Jimmy looked very urgent. Jimmy didn't want to endure the sticky feeling on his body anymore. He quickly returned to the manor, only to find that the door of the bathroom was locked, and there was still the sound of water coming from inside. Pausing in his footsteps, Jimmy consciously sat on the sofa, waiting slowly. Jimmy doesn't want to go back to his bedroom now, because the things on his body will stain his house. Even the sofa that Jimmy was sitting on at this time was where other mutants often sat. Jimmy knew they might be unhappy, but Jimmy knew better that they dared not speak up. The battle with Mel not only won the right to use the bathroom, Jimmy also established enough status in the minds of these mutants. The scissors in his hand were thrown on the table, and the boxing suit was also taken off and put aside to be used as a bathrobe later. Jimmy closed his eyes and slowly calmed down. Jimmy, who had calmed down, felt as if he had fallen into a very mysterious realm. Faintly, a big book appeared in front of Jimmy. The book began to turn the pages slowly, and Jimmy looked forward very hard. Kick forward, kick back. At this moment, the things that had been cultivated were once again displayed in front of Jimmy's eyes. Jimmy knew that this was his right to watch the next content. It seems to confirm what Jimmy thought in his heart. When Shunpo appeared in the skill, it opened a new chapter. The road to martial arts. At this moment, it is officially opened. This process was very short, and soon Jimmy opened his eyes. The look of joy was almost on Jimmy's face. This time, Jimmy not only unlocked all of Wuji's abilities, but even got an ability that shouldn't appear in Wuji's skill panel, Agni Domination. Happy. Crack. Suddenly a soft sound brought Jimmy out of his excitement. Came back? Well, I'm back. Jimmy looked at the words and said with a smile on his face. So slow. Upon hearing this, Mel shook off the drops of water on his hands. I'm having some trouble. With your ability, this kind of novice level shouldn't be in trouble? Mel said to Jimmy while arranging her hair. Hey hey hey. When Jimmy heard this, he could only laugh with a guilty conscience. You can't tell a girl that you are afraid of bugs, can you? That would be embarrassing. You helped me a lot today, thank you. Although Jimmy didn't say it, Mel understood it instantly. Recalling his performance in the ring back then, the corner of Mel's mouth twitched, but he still held back. You asked for a pair of scissors this time. Mel suddenly saw the scissors on the coffee table. Yes, this hair is too troublesome. Hearing this, Jimmy scratched his hair and said helplessly. Then you have to think about it, it will be even uglier if you cut your hair. Mel heard the words, said something lightly, and went back to his room. This sentence immediately extinguished Jimmy's eagerness to wash up. Glancing at the scissors on the coffee table, Jimmy hesitated, finally picked up the scissors and threw them out. Handsomeness is a lifetime thing. Jimmy said so to himself, and walked into the bathroom. Soon, Jimmy walked out in a boxer suit with a wide hood. After washing up, Jimmy didn't go back to his bedroom, but knocked on Mel's room. Wait a moment. Mel's voice came through the room, and Mel didn't ask who it was. In fact, Mel knew who was knocking on his door. In this manner, there is no one else who dares to knock on his own door. It didn't take long for Jimmy to wait, and Mel's door was opened. What happened? Are there any mutants playing with fire in our manor? Jimmy asked Mel, the leader of the manor. Yes, I am. Mel heard the words and said that he could play with fire. Aren't your mutant abilities energy absorption and teleportation? When Jimmy heard this, his pupils widened suddenly, and he looked at this beautiful girl in disbelief. Do you think that you are the only one keeping your hand? Upon hearing this, Mel turned and walked into the bedroom, but the door was not closed. Jimmy naturally followed in. I can not only absorb energy, but also control energy according to my needs, and even change the nature of energy. Mel took 2 glasses and poured 2 glasses of water. There is no alcohol here. Jimmy took the water from Mel and took a sip, suppressing the shock in his heart. Switching the water glass to his left hand, Jimmy stretched out his right hand, and a cloud of golden thoughts appeared in Jimmy's hand. Seeing this, Mel didn't hesitate, and directly put his hand on this mass of energy. In just an instant, this group of energy disappeared directly. Immediately afterwards, Melpin with a serious face stretched out his hand, and Jimmy also looked at it seriously. Waiting for the flame to appear. It is very simple to practice flame control. To put it bluntly, it is to teach fighters how to master flames and ultimately dominate them. However, time passed by every minute and every second, and after about 20 seconds, a small flame appeared in Mel's palm. Jimmy looked up, and Mel's face suddenly became a little ugly. Ahem, I haven't had time to develop this ability yet. Yeah, that's great too. Jimmy touched his nose and didn't say much. So, you just didn't hold back. The bone claws stretched out immediately, and lightly touched the small flame. The mind energy in the body was also fully mobilized by Jimmy at this moment, and began to run according to a specific trajectory. When the tip of the bone claw touched the small flame rushed into Jimmy's body as if attracted by something. Hi. Why so much Sonda, but so little Wuji? That's because Lai Yan domination is stuck here. Therefore, Wu Ji, who seems to have the least technical content, needs the most talent in the Arad continent. But Jimmy has the most suitable talent for Wu Ji, the self-healing factor. Will others hear you here? No, the sound insulation here is very good. Where are those demons? They don't care about us. That's good. Jimmy breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that. Jimmy has completed the practice of flame control. Although this ability is placed in the place where martial arts can only be cultivated. However, his cultivation is really simple. Absorb the flames into the body, and then use the mind energy as nourishment to continuously grow the flame. That's all there is to it. Of course, many people died on the way to practice this. What happened? Mel sat on a chair and asked Jimmy. Do you want to get out of here? Jimmy thought about it for a long time, and finally asked Mel. Jimmy never wanted to stay here. The reason why Mel disclosed this news is mainly because of 2 reasons. The first one is that it is impossible for Jimmy alone to escape from this demon arena. And the second reason is that, in Jimmy's impression, the stronger the person, the less likely he is to accept such a life. And Mel is obviously the most powerful person in this manner. So, Jimmy approached Mel. Of course, I dream of it. When Mel heard this, his pupils shrank slightly, and he hurriedly said to Jimmy. Before that, I need to know what the hell is this thing that we must bring. Jimmy took out the mace pendant around his neck. Although this pendant still looked pretty, it was an indescribable shame for Jimmy. It is a disgrace to the traversers. After the time traveler crosses over, even the golden finger may not be as big as him. However, there are not many who become slaves directly, right? Well, Jimmy forgot, who is to blame for the fact of becoming a slave. I don't know what this thing is for, but I have seen him show off his power. As Mel said, he also took out the pendant around his neck. What Mel was put on was not a leather case like a dog collar, but a bright silver pendant similar to Jimmy's. It's just that Mel's pendant is in the shape of a half moon. It looks different from the coldness of Jimmy's spike, but it gives people a delicate and beautiful feeling. But it was clear that Mel didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. I have seen other people's holsters start. When they are started, a lot of black flames will gushes out from the holster, and it will stop when everything is burned. If there is no accident, the one you and I brought should be the same, but the quantity should be much larger. When Jimmy heard this, he fell into deep thought. The black flames were definitely the fire of hell. As the saying goes, it is difficult to live up to the reputation, and the fire of hell, which is about to become the signature of hell, is obviously very strong. Moreover, as far as Jimmy knows about the performance of Ghost Rider, he can also know the horror of hellfire. If this is the case, then things will be difficult. In my previous life, I was a student majoring in electromechanical. when I was studying mechanics, I learned about metal materials. There is an introduction about quenching inside. At the same time, Jimmy knew how powerful the fire was. This is the easiest thing to get, and it can burn the combustible material to vaporization under a certain temperature. Jimmy doesn't know whether his self-healing factor can stop the burning of hell, and Jimmy has no intention of challenging. If it is really successful, not only will it not matter, but it will also subdue the fire of hell, which is naturally pleasing. However, if it fails, it will all be over. Then that is to say, if we want to leave here, we must first get rid of this necklace, right? Looking at the pendant in his hand, Jimmy felt like crying. Why were you so mean? What's wrong with wearing a holster? Can you die? Is it useful to make such a good-looking one? We'll die. However, that's all Jimmy thinks about, if Jimmy is really allowed to go back to the time when he made the choice. It is estimated that Jimmy will still choose this. Sometimes, dignity is higher than life. However, this problem is really difficult to solve. It's kind of like a bird in a cage in Hinata's house. So, if we want to leave here, we must first solve this problem. Do you have any solutions? Looking at Mel in front of him, Jimmy asked hopefully. Mel also met Jimmy's hopeful eyes. The cherry lips parted slightly, and the cold words slowly entered Jimmy's ears. No, Jimmy was stunned when he heard this. If you want to solve this, there are only two ways. Either you can resist the fire of hell, or kill all the demons here. Jimmy puts his own pendant back, and it is no longer a pendant now. In Jimmy's heart, this is a bomb that can kill him at any time. That's right, there are indeed only these two options, but the first one is impossible in a short time, and the second one cannot be done, and the second one doesn't exist. Mel said without giving Jimmy any face. What should I do? Jimmy lowered his head, feeling a little uncomfortable. There is no other way for the time being. Let's work hard to make yourself stronger. Upon hearing this, Mel shrugged and said helplessly. Looking at Jimmy in front of him, Mel's eyes flickered slightly, but he still didn't say anything in the end. Now, Mel can't believe Jimmy. Okay, so can you squeeze in 2 hours a day? Hearing this, Jimmy took a deep breath and asked Mel at the same time. Of course, what do you want to do? Only by fighting can you quickly increase your strength. Of course, I will also teach you some fighting skills to develop strength, and finally escape this damn place together. Jimmy quickly sorted out his thoughts, and if he wanted to escape from here, he had to get this necklace first. But now neither Jimmy nor Mel can handle this necklace. Then, you can only increase your own strength first. It is good. Mel's eyes lit up when he heard Jimmy's words. To be honest, Mel was still very envious of the moves Jimmy had mastered. Okay, let's do this for today. I'll go back first if there's nothing else to do. Jimmy said something to Mel, and got up to leave. Okay, rest early. See you in the afternoon. Okay, bye-bye. Hearing this, Jimmy waved to Mel and left Mel's bedroom. This Mel still has a secret. Jimmy thought for sure in his heart. One thing Mel did not tell Jimmy was that he had someone out there. Mel always believed that her parents would definitely come to save her. However, Mel didn't want to tell anyone about this. If the wind leaks out, it will be over. After all, no matter where, there are traitors. As for Mel, he didn't have the slightest thought of trying to eliminate dissidents. Just wait for redemption honestly. Jimmy doesn't know Mel's little secret, but Jimmy feels that Mel is hiding something from him. However, it is impossible to ask such a question directly. Therefore, Jimmy pretended not to know anything. If Mel has a different heart, then it's useless even if he knows about it. If Mel didn't have a different heart, then he didn't need to know. Thinking so much now, to put it bluntly, is unfounded worrying, taking up my own little rest time. Throwing away the messy thoughts in his mind, Jimmy gradually fell asleep. While Jimmy was asleep, the outside world was also turbulent. Victor has joined the mysterious mutant organization. After joining this organization, Victor has also seen what it means to have people, and beyond the sky. At the same time, Victor also met his first love. Master, do you value this kid very much? A young man with black appearance stood behind Ji Yi and asked Ji Yi. This is a born magician. His talent for time and space has been engraved in his mind. He will replace me and become the new supreme mage. Ji Yi looked up at the huge sphere in front of him. Through the sphere, Modu and Ji Yi saw Jimmy resting in the Devil's Arena. After all these years, Ji Yi was really tired, and death, for some people, might be a kind of nightmare. But for some, it's a relief. After guarding the earth for an unknown number of years, Ji Yi was tired and exhausted. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Gui in the original time and space to hand Dormammu into the hands of a person who has practiced magic for less than a month. Even if this person's magical talent is great, it is even more impossible to be killed by Cassius. Although blackening is 3 times stronger, whitewashing is weaker by 3 points. However, with the strength of Gui who can wrestle with the King of Asgard and Hell Mephisto. Even if Cassius is 30 times stronger, it is impossible to defeat Gui. This is a farce. A farce arranged by Gui for himself. As for Jimmy's talent for time and space, no matter who it is, they directly travel through countless latitudes and come here. The talent of time and space is absolutely one-on-one. This is not Ancient One taking Doctor Strange to travel in other latitudes. My lord, after Wolverine returned, he went to the princess's room. A demon who was also wrapped in a hood half-kneeled in front of Dante. Well, I see. Dante's fingers tapped lightly on the chair. To be honest, Dante didn't take it seriously. The entertainment method there was already very monotonous. They are both good-looking again, so it's okay for something to happen. Dante is also very light on this. However, this princess is not perfect. No matter what, you have to earn back the loss for Mr. West. Dante thought to himself, but how can this guy who has only been here for a few days make enough money? Matt, how's the response to Wolverine? Dante tapped the handle of the chair and asked his right hand. Wolverine's response is very good. I heard that it has been spread to hell. There are many rich ladies who are ready to take a look. Of course, there are also some nobles. Oh. Is that so? That's really good. Go and change the rookie arena for me, make it a Wolverine-only event, and then find me a pack of 100. 200 wolves, and then release the news, staged the day after tomorrow. Dante's mouth outlines a cruel smile. A whole pack of wolves, even if it's me, I don't dare to directly harden the steel, right? Having been under Lord West for so long, Dante has roughly understood the joys of those rich people. They like to look handsome, and they like to look cruel. Today, both are available. It's hard for Dante to imagine what kind of reaction he will have this time. Yes. And then? Does the princess wash the sheets? Dante continued. No. Then you continue to stare. Dante waved his hand, indicating that there was nothing else to do. If something really happened to the two of them, then he could have a taste of it. Yes, Dante is still not sure if Jimmy did that kind of thing. But does the devil need to care about this? Not at all. With a deep hutch, Jimmy woke up, and it was now full light. That's right, when Jimmy went to fight, it was around 11 or 12 o'clock. Such a game can be done in less than 10 minutes. In other words, Jimmy fell asleep at about 1 or 2 o'clock yesterday. Although she still slept very late, she was much stronger than when she first came here. Patting himself on the face, Jimmy didn't go out, but sat up cross-legged and began to practice mind energy. Although the room is not small, it is not big either. The space is just right enough for Jimmy to perform his actions. In such an environment, Jimmy is reluctant to go out. The training time is always very fast. When Jimmy opened his eyes with a long breath, it was already past 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There was lunch here, but Jimmy didn't eat it. Instead, he continued to practice, and the thoughts began to rush towards the cells in the body. This is cultivating steel and iron bones. An hour later, the Nyen Chi no longer strengthened the cells, but began to rush towards the small white flame in Jimmy's body, which was cultivating his own flame. Treat the human body as a furnace, and use thoughts as fuel. This is the follow-up practice method of mind chi domination, and the temperature of the white flame is not even as high as that of a lighter. But Jimmy doesn't care. The temperature of the flame can be increased, and the seniors probably summed up 2 methods. One is to cultivate day and night with thoughts and energy. One is by devouring other flames. The temperature of the flame will cause the flame to change in color. It can be roughly divided into dark red, around 600 degrees Celsius. Deep red, around 700 degrees Celsius. Orange red, about 1000 degrees Celsius. Pure orange, around 1100 degrees Celsius. Golden orange, around 1200 degrees Celsius. Golden yellow, around 1300 degrees Celsius. Golden white, about 1400 degrees Celsius. Pure white, about 1500 degrees Celsius. White and blue, above 1500 degrees Celsius. The melting point of tungsten is more than 3000 degrees Celsius. It may not be clear to say this. In other words, in the early light bulbs, the filament inside was tungsten. This is a substance with a melting point twice that of steel. As for Jimmy, at least he needs to cultivate the flame to a pure orange color before he can instantly kill an ordinary person. Of course, when you really fight, it's not calculated like this. The practice time lasted until 6 o'clock in the evening. Until this time, Jimmy stood up slowly. There are no people around Jimmy who practice Nian Chi together, so Jimmy doesn't know how fast he is practicing. But in all fairness, the foundation has just been laid in 3 years, and Jimmy is quite dissatisfied with this speed. Moreover, Jimmy has another plan in his heart, which is to seek refuge with Ji Yi. This is not a whim, but something that Jimmy has been thinking about since he came to the Devil's Arena. If you want to escape from this Devil's Arena, then it's hard not to cause bloodshed. And once there is a bloodshed, then he will be hunted down from hell. I still know how many caddies and tails of Jimmy I have. Although he had killed 6 or 7 demons, Jimmy had never been proud of it. 6 or 7 demons, 6 or 7, never proud of it. Never. However, Jimmy really didn't think he could survive the devil's pursuit after escaping. My golden finger is a kind of inheritance, not the kind of system that gets stronger with each battle. Therefore, Jimmy needs to find a particularly reliable backer when he escapes. In Jimmy's impression, at this time period, the strongest in the kind and lawful camp should be Ji Yi. But running from the Rockies to the Himalayas, from America to Nepal. Oh my God, Jimmy gets dizzy just thinking about it. Sighing deeply, Jimmy walked out of his room a little dejectedly. This game is really difficult. After eating something casually, Jimmy and Mel looked at each other. Then they walked out together. Try? Jimmy stood still, and the haze in his heart was swept away at this moment. No matter what difficulties you have in life, you must face them bravely, all with cute smiles. It's called having fun. Bring it on. Mel smiled slightly when he heard this, and stretched out his hand to Jimmy. Faced with such an invitation, it was impossible for Mel to refuse. Although Mel has no masochistic tendencies, there is an undeniable fact that it is. Within a certain period of time, Mel was indeed one of those who became stronger the harder he was beaten. Jimmy nodded, just when Mel thought Jimmy was about to attack. Only to find that Jimmy took out a red rope. After tying up his hair, Jimmy was ready to start. In this kind of battle of the nature of learning, Jimmy still has time to be hypocritical. I am coming. Before Mel finished speaking, he appeared behind Jimmy the next moment. What? With a loud shout, Jimmy didn't turn around, nor squatted down like before. Jimmy, whose overall quality has improved a lot, can already keep up with Mel's teleportation speed. Elbow. It's a very simple fighting technique, but when used at this moment, the effect is the best. Seeing this, Mel's eyes flashed with shock, but he ignored it and continued to punch Jimmy in the head. But that's not realistic. Mel's fist hasn't touched Jimmy's head yet. Mel had already been sent flying by this one elbow. How can that be? Mel looked at his hands in disbelief. Mel really couldn't understand why Jimmy could break through to such an intensity in just one day. With just one blow, he reached a saturated state, and even pushed himself so far. My ability has broken through, and my overall strength has increased by about 1/3. Jimmy shrugged, but he didn't want to explain too much to Mel. When Mel heard this, he nodded with a calm face, but his heart was already filled with turbulent waves. What? Can mutants still break through? Who are you fooling? However, Mel didn't ask, but Mel had already decided that when his father leveled the arena, he must absorb this person in front of him into his organization. This is definitely a rare combat power. Come on, let me teach you some force-generating skills. Jimmy waved to Mel. Mel heard the words, and quickly came to Jimmy's side, putting on a look of listening attentively. Jimmy. With such force, will the body really not collapse? Mel was still very curious about why Jimmy's explosive power was so strong. But after listening to Jimmy's detailed explanation, Jimmy suddenly understood. This is a kind of force that hurts the enemy by 1,000 and hurts oneself by 80,000. It is said to be a move, but in fact there is no shadow of a move at all. To sum it up, it is probably to pursue the most extreme output, and not care about the body at all. It seems that this is not suitable for you. Jimmy scratched his head in distress. Jimmy also taught Victor when he was in the Rocky Mountains. Victor had never asked himself such a question back then. And fighters who have gone farther and farther on the road of Wuji also have special physical training skills, reinforced iron bones to build a foundation. As a result, Jimmy didn't realize that ordinary people's bodies couldn't bear such a force. Suddenly I am envious of your self-healing factor. After explaining for a long time, Jimmy and Mel were sitting on the steps at the gate of the manor. Mel also turned his face sideways at this time, and said to Jimmy, "Uh-huh." When Jimmy heard the words, he didn't say that energy absorption and teleportation are also a good combination. In fact, in Jimmy's eyes, the self-healing factor and Jiwawang are the best combination of this year. The existence of domineering armor also made Jimmy change his view on adamantium. "It's okay, then let me teach you what I'm practicing now. This should not require too much physical fitness." With that said, Jimmy began to explain to Mel. In fact, Jimmy has not yet learned how to use Iron Mountain. However, there is no big problem when explaining it. As an extended skill of domineering armor, Tishin needs to cooperate with Nian Qi. And even if there is no Overlord body armor, in the process of using the stick, it still has its own Overlord body. It is a skill that is relatively impossible to be interrupted. Although the time is short, some miraculous effects can still be exerted at certain times. It can be regarded as an ability that is more compatible with Mel, right? And it seems that Mel also likes this skill very much. Immediately, Jimmy explained more happily. In any case, the mentality of lecturing to a beautiful woman is different from that of lecturing to a rough guy. Even if that rough guy is his real brother. Time flies quickly when you are studying. When one is willing to speak and the other is willing to listen. The sky, which was already a little dark, was completely dark at this time. At this time, Jimmy also stopped explaining. The talk is almost done, and the rest needs to be done by Mel. In this way, Jimmy and Mel went back to prepare for the next battle. Both of them are smart people, so they naturally know what needs to be done to live better here. This time, Jimmy didn't spend too much time. Soon, Jimmy and Mel met again. Mel's dress made Jimmy's eyes shine even more. Mel didn't wear makeup, but she was already young. Even without makeup, her skin was fair. A tight combat uniform outlined Mel's perfect figure. The sudden beauty made Jimmy unable to take his eyes off it. While Jimmy was looking at Mel, Mel was also looking at Jimmy. The eyes of the two flickered slightly, and collided at the same time at the next moment. But they quickly shifted their gazes. "Wait, someone will come and take us there in a while." After Mel finished speaking, he sat on the sofa, crossed his legs and closed his eyes. The battle of life and death is about to begin, and Mel is also working hard to adjust his state. Although Mel is already the strongest in this manor, there is not only one manor here. Mel also has many strong opponents, such as the guy next door who manipulates magnetism. Hearing this, Jimmy also found a place to sit down, quietly waiting for the next battle. If the intensity is still as usual, then Jimmy said that there is nothing to worry about in the future. Without keeping everyone waiting, a group of devil girls soon came to the manor in groups. They took away the mutants in the manor one by one. It wasn't until this time that Jimmy seemed to realize that his neighbors seemed to be missing too. Soon, almost all the people were taken away. Jimmy and Mel were the only ones left in the room. As for the devil girl, there was only one left. Seeing this, Mel's face suddenly turned pale. Being suddenly waved is obviously not going to be a pleasant thing. Although there is still a devil girl, Mel doesn't think that a newcomer will be treated like this. So, under Mel's complicated eyes, the devil girl walked towards Jimmy. Then, under Mel's desperate eyes, the devil girl passed by Jimmy and came to her. Mel didn't know what to say for a while. He could only leave a word when he passed by Jimmy. "Practice well." Seeing everyone leave, Jimmy rubbed his forehead with some headaches. Jimmy is not a fool. Combining the environment and Mel's words, Jimmy naturally knows that he may be fucked. But why is this so? Wasn't it very kind yesterday? Why did you suddenly turn your face today? Was it yesterday? With a sigh, Jimmy returned to his room a little lonely. Strength is not something that can be improved overnight. Jimmy can also think that it won't be too long before his own venue arrives. So, Jimmy went straight to his room and went to sleep. Jimmy has been exhausted for the past 2 days. This nocturnal lifestyle is really tormenting. Mel, who ended the fight, was not taken back to the manor directly, but went to a medical examination place. Mel was not allowed to stay at the manor until after a comprehensive inspection. And a report also appeared on Dante's desk. Looking at the complete on the report, Dante sighed with regret. What a pity. The day and night passed quickly, and Jimmy was always asleep. It wasn't until Jimmy's room was knocked that Jimmy woke up from his sleep. Open the door, only to find that it is a demon girl. "Mr. Wolverine, we've brought you some food." The girl's voice was beautiful, and what she said was even more pleasant. Jimmy got out of the way naturally, and saw a lot of maids walking into the room, each carrying a tray. Salmon, caviar, steak, roast goose. Countless delicacies were sent into Jimmy's room, making Jimmy's throat squirm constantly. It has been more than 3 years since he came to this world, and it is the first time for Jimmy to taste the food of this foreign country. It's just that I didn't expect to be in such a place, looking at the neatly arranged and exquisitely shaped food. Jimmy was not too happy. Although the food is good, it is more or less like a decapitated meal. However, this did not affect Jimmy's appetite. After sending the devil girl out, Jimmy started his own gluttonous feast. He didn't keep these maids waiting for a long time. Jimmy soon appeared in front of the maids looking like a dog. Although enjoying the services of these maids, Jimmy still knows that his status here is not as good as these maids. Under the leadership of a maid, Jimmy quickly came to the place where he should come. Jimmy remembered this place. He had already fought in this place twice. Although the ring was changed to Jimmy's special session, there was still no change in it. What? Oh. As soon as he walked into the arena, Jimmy was taken aback by the cheers like a tsunami. Jimmy wanted to leave almost subconsciously, but the gate of the arena had already been closed. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Jimmy's reaction immediately made the people below burst into laughter. Seeing this, Jimmy could only squeeze a smile uglier than crying. But in the eyes of the audience below, such a smile is still pretty. Woo. After calming down, Jimmy's body began to relax. Taking off the boxing suit and throwing it aside, a faint golden light appeared on Jimmy's body. At this moment, Jimmy has already entered the fighting state. In any case, the Overlord body armor is opened first. As long as you don't get knocked down, you won't die in a while. At this moment, at the place Jimmy was familiar with, the iron fence was slowly opened, and there was a rumbling sound. When he saw that it was the Hell Demon Wolf, Jimmy slowly breathed a sigh of relief. When he saw the second head, Jimmy could still accept it, but the smile on his face was gone. When he saw the third and fourth heads, the bone claws stretched out quickly, and the half-baked flames in his body were gathered on his hands. Although the temperature was not high, the bone spurs also began to turn red slowly. Jimmy rushed towards the Hell Demon Wolf at high speed. The magic wolves came out one by one. Jimmy really didn't dare to delay any longer. Jimmy doesn't know how many will appear, but it doesn't need too many. As long as there are double digits, it will be difficult for him to survive. Therefore, Jimmy can only take the initiative. Stepping on his feet repeatedly, Jimmy appeared in front of a magic wolf in an instant. A sharp bone spur pierced out, and in just an instant, a demon wolf was out of the game. Jimmy, who has awakened his own potential, is far different from when he first came here. Although it has only increased by about 1/3, Wu Ji's moves have been increased by several times to dozens of times. With Jimmy's current ability, he can completely kill himself who just came here in seconds. With one grab and swing, while sweeping off the neck of a demon wolf, his figure turned around halfway. Elbow. Before the group of demon wolves could react, Jimmy had already killed 2 of them instantly. At this time, the other companions finally reacted. Grinning his teeth and showing a fierce look in his eyes, he jumped with all his might, and threw himself straight at Jimmy's vest. What? Jimmy didn't turn around, but threw an elbow directly. Kakaka. There was a sound of bones breaking, and the menacing wolf hit the ground heavily. There was no time to look at the situation of the wolf, and Jimmy quickly rushed towards the gate of the fence. What? Another demon wolf attacked and flew towards him, and Jimmy finally came to the gate of the fence. It didn't block the door, but kept a distance of 2 meters from the gate of the fence. Such a distance can ensure that Jimmy only faces one demon wolf at a time, and at the same time, the passage will not be blocked. Just when Jimmy's situation stabilized a bit, amidst various cheers below, Jimmy's performance also attracted the attention of some interested people. Keep an eye on it, this guy is very good and can be cultivated. Yes. Time passed slowly, and the corpses of the demon wolf beside Jimmy had piled up into a hill. Almost an hour has passed since the beginning. During this hour, Jimmy not only wanted to kill the charging demon wolf, but also threw its corpse aside so as not to hinder the ensuing battle. In less than an hour, Jimmy's physical strength was also rapidly depleted. Although Jimmy's stamina was outstanding, it wasn't to the point where he could explode for an hour without intervals. Now Jimmy is really tired. The thoughts in the body can relieve fatigue, but Jimmy insisted on this idea and dared not use it. As early as half an hour ago, Jimmy had already removed the Overlord body armor. The thoughts in his body were still abundant, which Jimmy kept for emergency use. It is not the first time that Jimmy, who has lived in the deep mountains and old forests for 3 years, has encountered wolves. So Jimmy knew that among the wolves, there was a core member with extraordinary fighting power. That's a wolf. In fantasy novels, they have a more domineering name, Wolf King. With this amount of wolves, there must be a Wolf King. And this Wolf King is still very strong. Therefore, the abundant thoughts in the body are prepared for the upcoming Wolf King. Humans are always afraid of the unknown. However, Jimmy had already guessed what was about to happen, so naturally he would no longer feel fear. In fact, Jimmy hated this feeling too. Really, I can guess everything, I really have no gaming experience. For nearly an hour, Jimmy's paws became extremely red as the temperature continued to heat up. Once again, he habitually swung his sharp claws, but he didn't expect to pounce on nothing. The huge inertia almost didn't flash to Jimmy's waist. Before he had time to adjust his standing posture, he saw a black shadow flashing. Jimmy felt as if he had hit a train. It flew out directly. What? When the body was attached to the iron net, a series of electric currents appeared, which made Jimmy shout out unbearably. At the same time, the body is also under the action of gravity, and Jimmy's body is also viciously smashed to the ground. I go. Jimmy struggled to get up from the ground. The thoughts in his body began to circulate, and a faint golden light appeared on Jimmy's body. At this time, Jimmy's injuries have also recovered. This is the scary thing about the self-healing factor cannot be controlled in the first place, it is a passive skill. But just like Magneto, he couldn't even control a coin when he was young, but he slowly reached the point where he could destroy the world. The self-healing factor is also growing, with the development of Jimmy's body and the continuous nourishment of the mind. The self-healing factor will also become stronger and stronger, and now, the self-healing factor has also begun to show its glory. One strike made a contribution, but the Wolf King didn't take advantage of the victory to pursue, but opened his mouth and raised his neck and roared to the sky. For nearly an hour, Jimmy was exhausted. But the Wolf King was also very aggrieved, being held back in the dark tunnel and watching his clansmen die one by one. The Wolf King, the whole wolf is going crazy. What? Not to be outdone, Jimmy raised his chest and growled at the Wolf King. Even because of excessive force, both arms are subconsciously backwards to maintain the balance of the body. Oh. Go on. The roar of one man and one wolf immediately stirred up the atmosphere of the audience below. Everyone stood up and shouted frantically, roaring. At this moment, Jimmy and the Wolf King also met at this moment. The Wolf King was slender, drawing a graceful arc in midair with fierce eyes and sharp teeth, he flew towards Jimmy. Not to be outdone, Jimmy spun around on the spot and exerted a lot of force on his feet. The bone claws that were heated to red by the flames in the body moved upwards, and the claws pierced from both sides of the Wolf King's body. The Wolf King also bit Jimmy on the shoulder. Jimmy was in pain, and pushed forward with one knee, accompanied by a shower of blood, and amidst the cheers of the audience from hell. Jimmy fell to the ground, and the bite wound on his shoulder was rapidly healing itself. This kind of fatal wound on other mutants had already healed when Jimmy got up from the ground. But the Wolf King who fell on the ground does not have such self-healing ability, even if it is also a wolf. Without turning his head to look at the Wolf King who had already lost his breath of life, Jimmy was tall and straight, with red bone claws spreading in the air. At that moment, Jimmy was like an invincible god of war. Oh. I love you. The audience in the audience also gave face and cheered crazily. Feeling the feeling of being surrounded by stars, Jimmy closed his eyes intoxicated. With the disappearance of vision, Jimmy, whose hearing was amplified, actually heard a man's voice. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, but Jimmy ignored it. With a slight movement of his mind, the red bone claws were instantly retracted. Hi. Jimmy squatted on the ground in pain, it was so hot. So, don't you know how to resist? Jimmy asked softly in the ear of the man in front of him. I can't, possibly, cooperate with your performance. This thin-looking man lost his breath of life after he finished speaking intermittently. Jimmy pulled his paw back helplessly. Looking at the corpse on the ground, Jimmy was speechless for a while. This is the arena. Do you think I like to fight with others? Slowly picking up his boxing uniform and casually draping it over his shoulders, Jimmy walked out of the arena with 3 steps and 3 shakes. Under the leadership of the maid, Jimmy quickly returned to the manor. Instead of washing up, she went straight into Mel's room. It has been 3 months since I came to the demon arena. There were less than 5 days left before Mel was auctioned off. Jimmy knew that he absolutely couldn't wait any longer now. If there is no Mel, then it would be impossible to escape alone. Not only that, during the past 3 months, the relationship between Jimmy and Mel has also heated up, which belongs to the point where more than friends are not enough lovers. How about it? Seeing that it was Jimmy, Mel poured 2 glasses of water with ease and handed Jimmy a glass. It's okay, I met a fool. Hearing this, Jimmy shrugged and said casually. It's less than 5 days before you leave, right? Jimmy took a sip of the water in the glass and asked Mel. Ah. When Mel heard this, his face suddenly became ugly. 6 months later, Mel is now not sure if his father will come to rescue him. I want to try. Jimmy put the cup in his hand again, came to Mel's side, and looked at Mel sincerely. Are you ready? Mel asked Jimmy. To be honest, Mel really didn't want to try. Because if something goes wrong, both of them will have to pay with their lives. Of course. Jimmy nodded upon hearing this, indicating that he was fine. However, even though Jimmy said so, Jimmy's heart is still a little empty. The legendary Hellfire. Jimmy really didn't know if his self-healing ability could hold it. Okay, I believe you. Mel stared closely at Jimmy's eyes, and Mel couldn't hold back anymore. His father, whom he had given great hope to, did not come to save him. In less than 5 days, I will be sold to hell. Mel must start saving himself now. But for now, the only person I can trust is the man in front of me. Gently closing her eyes, Mel raised her head slightly, revealing the silver pendant hanging on the neck of the snow-white goose. Bring it on. Wait a minute, this is the first time I've come into contact with the fire of hell. I don't know how painful it will be during the process of absorbing this, so I will probably shout out. I need you to absorb the sound, understand? Jimmy felt a little helpless when he looked at Melton, who had closed his eyes. Although it felt a little embarrassing to say this, Jimmy said it anyway. Otherwise, no matter if it fails to absorb or attract other demons, this is not a pleasant thing. The biggest possibility is that the two lost their precious lives because of this. Okay. Mel's pretty face blushed slightly upon hearing this, but she quickly made preparations. As long as the damn dog leash is taken off, Mel can teleport away from this damn place with Jimmy. Okay, then I'll start. Hearing this, Jimmy exhaled deeply, and the sharp bone claws stretched out instantly, and the red flames in his body began to heat the bone claws. It took about an hour for Jimmy's bone claws to finish warming up. The sharp bone claws carried a heinous temperature. The temperature was so high that it even distorted the air around Jimmy. Raising his claws, Jimmy stabbed cautiously towards the silver pendant. He didn't use too much force, just put his bone claws on the half-moon pendant. Jimmy wanted to rely on the temperature to melt the pendant with a hole. Because the pendant had already been placed in Jimmy's hand, Mel was not affected too much. The diffused temperature was also absorbed by Mel as part of the energy in his body. At the same time, Mel stretched out his hand and put it on Jimmy's shoulder. The absorbed energy was released by Mel again. Greatly strengthened the strength of the self-healing factor in Jimmy's body. Obviously, Mel also used all his strength. Originally, Jimmy's self-healing factor had already reached level 4. After 3 months of strengthening, the self-healing factor has also been greatly increased. Coupled with Mel's full support, Jimmy's resilience has reached a peak. Feeling the interference from the outside world, the silver half-moon pendant shook violently, and a little black emerged, but it was quickly absorbed into Jimmy's body. After going through Nian Qi, Mel's enhancement, and the technology dominated by Agni, this hellfire still caused extremely terrible damage in the body of steel and iron bones that had been cultivated for 3.5 years. Wherever it passed, the meridian broke inch by inch, and it was Jimmy. But it doesn't matter, at the same time that every inch was broken, the self-healing factor in Jimmy's body also started to work. After being completely destroyed, it will be completely repaired immediately. Jimmy's bone claw suddenly stretched out, and the fire of hell suddenly spread out from Jimmy's other claw, going straight deep into the ground. This process lasted for a short time, but it gave Jimmy a feeling that life would be worse than death. However, fortunately, the self-healing factor is quite powerful. At the very least, it was guaranteed that Jimmy's body was not directly cut open. Of course, Jimmy's physical strength also played a big role. What? Jimmy cried out, it hurt so much. Mel looked at Jimmy in front of him with some worry. Fortunately, Jimmy's appearance did not show any abnormal reactions. Mel is also absorbing the energy of the hellfire as much as possible, and at the same time using energy control to transform the energy released by the hellfire into nature to strengthen Jimmy's body. In short, under the joint suppression of the two fourth-level mutants, Jimmy and Mel, they finally found a balance. With Jimmy as the conversion source, the fire of hell was introduced under the earth. In fact, even if it is sent to the ground, with the special nature of the fire of hell, it can continue to burn. Moreover, the main function of hellfire is not to cause damage to the body. The main ability of the fire of hell is directly acting on the soul. However, Jimmy's soul was not harmed even a little bit. As for why Jimmy didn't receive the full amount of damage from the flames of hell, the main reason was that a certain mysterious strongman made a move quietly. Of course, Jimmy didn't know any of this. Jimmy thought that his strength was too strong, or that the fire of hell was nothing more than that. Time passed bit by bit, and for nearly an hour, the hellfire that had been lingering in Jimmy's body finally lost its source. Jimmy slowly opened his eyes, wiped the sweat off his face, and Jimmy sat on the ground with a prostrated face. "Are you okay?" Mel asked Jimmy softly. "I think I might need a glass of water right now," Jimmy said with a trembling voice. To be honest, Jimmy was still very excited when he wrestled with such a high-end gadget for the first time. Especially when they won, it was even more exciting. So much so that Jimmy ignored why the hellfire that was transported underground suddenly disappeared. Mel didn't notice this either, and quickly poured a glass of water and handed it to Jimmy. At the same time, he stretched out his hands, and two fireballs appeared in Mel's hands. Mel now needs to use up all the energy in his body. In fact, now that Mel can leave, teleportation can ensure that Mel disappears here without anyone noticing. If this is the case, Jimmy can only stare blankly. But Mel didn't do that. Mel can't do such a shameful thing. After resting for about half an hour, the sky outside had already brightened a bit. Jimmy was now ready to start working on his own troubles. The bone claws exposed to the air were glowing red, and Jimmy and Mel looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, the trust between each other has once again reached a new level. The process is similar to the previous one, except for the pain, there is basically no danger. And for some reason, Jimmy felt that this time seemed to be smoother than the last time. Looking at the huge ball of hellfire in his hand, Ji showed distressed expression on his face. It's really useless to keep this thing here. However, it seems a pity to just throw it away like this. Suddenly, the scene of Jimmy absorbing the flames appeared in Ji's mind. Smiling slightly, the flame of hell in his hand was immediately compressed into a ball by Ji, and then disappeared in Ji's hands. "Come on. Let's get out of here." Seeing that the matter was finally over, Mel held Jimmy's hand, and the next moment, Jimmy and Mel had disappeared in this disgusting place. Jimmy only felt a slight flash in front of his eyes, and the next moment he appeared in an empty alley. Mel was still standing beside him. The feeling of traveling through space is not very comfortable, but Jimmy has a very familiar feeling about it. "Come with me." Mel didn't let go of Jimmy's hand, but asked Jimmy. "Huh? Where are you going?" Jimmy was slightly taken aback when he heard the words, but at the same time, Jimmy also felt that Mel's hand was still holding his own. After a little struggle, Mel let go of Jimmy's hand knowingly. "My house, there are a lot of mutants there." Mel didn't care about Jimmy's reaction. In 3 months, Mel felt that he had seen through this man. Mel admits that Jimmy is the nicest man she's ever met. Mel also did not deny his affection for Jimmy. However, Mel did not show this. To deal with a character like Jimmy, Mel felt that he needed to give him some stimulation. Mel already had a preliminary plan in mind. Just waiting for the fish to take the bait. "No, I still need to find someone else." When Jimmy heard the words, he hesitated for a moment. Faced with Mel's invitation, Jimmy was still very moved. Moreover, just escaped from the arena, Jimmy really needs an organization. Whether it is getting shelter or going to Carmitage, it is difficult for Jimmy to complete it alone, even with Victor. "If you are looking for someone, when will you have to find it alone? Come with me." Mel heard the words, said something lightly, turned around and walked out in one direction. Seeing this, Jimmy hesitated for a moment or followed quickly. In fact, deep in Jimmy's heart he was unwilling to part with Mel. Sensing the sound of footsteps behind him, where Jimmy couldn't see, a happy smile appeared on Mel's face. Now Mel can already confirm some things. For the rest of the journey, Mel didn't use teleportation, just walked quietly, and Jimmy followed quietly. About an hour later, Jimmy and Mel appeared at the gate of a manor. Grabbing Jimmy's hand, Mel took Jimmy into the manor with a teleport. "How is it? Is my house okay?" Mel let go of Jimmy's hand, pointed around and asked Jimmy in an ostentatious manner. Ah. Jimmy nodded and looked around, but suddenly found a floor-to-ceiling mirror with a height of one person placed next to the door. Walking slowly, Jimmy looked at himself in the mirror, with an intoxicated look in his eyes. It's all grown up like this, do you still want to look in the mirror? Mel came to Jimmy's side and said with a look of disdain. You really don't have the slightest sense of aesthetics. Without turning his head, Jimmy said, if fair skin, big eyes, a high nose bridge, and a melon-seeded face with some Asian characteristics are considered ugly. Well, Jimmy would rather jump into the crater. Sister, are you back? Suddenly, a lowly voice came into Jimmy's ears. Jimmy heard the sound and looked, but found a pretty little lowly standing on the stairs on the second floor. Kyle? I was about to ask you, where did Dad go? Mel heard this and asked with some doubts. Didn't Dad and Mom go to rescue you? There was also a puzzled look on Kyle's face. I'll go. Mel, I think we should go back and have a look. When Jimmy heard it, he immediately reacted. It can't be such a coincidence, can it? This perfect missed rescue? Then why did I suffer this crime? Even if it's time to take a bath, it's probably time to get rescued, right? I think so too. Without the slightest hesitation, Mel immediately held Jimmy's hand, and with a teleport, the two of them disappeared into this luxurious living room. After 2 or 3 teleports in succession, Jimmy and Mel appeared in the Devil's Arena. Looking at the scene in front of him, Mel was stunned. The battle seemed to be over, and the place that was supposed to be the gate of the arena had completely turned into ruins all over the place. The corpses of many demons and mutants fell to the ground interlaced with each other. All kinds of grotesque weapons fell or were inserted into the ground. The black and red blood blended together and formed small puddles. Sniff, sniff, Jimmy's nose twitched slightly, and a familiar smell passed into Jimmy's nose. A trace of disbelief flashed in Jimmy's eyes, and he walked over slowly looking for the smell. Victor. Looking at the Victor on the ground who was fixed on the ground with a spear piercing through his body. Huh? Jimmy? Damn. I see you at last, hurry up. Pull the damn stick out. Victor, who had his eyes closed, heard a familiar voice and hurriedly said to Jimmy. That mid-chi, that's full of energy. This is considered a fatal injury to anyone, but it may have lasted for more than 10 minutes on Victor, right? Oh. Hearing this, Jimmy nodded, and grasped the spear that had penetrated Victor with a little force with both hands. A cunning flashed in the corner of his eyes, and the spear turned slightly in Jimmy's hand, and Jimmy pulled it out in a circle. Ah. Jimmy, you bastard. You definitely did it on purpose. Victor immediately screamed and cursed at Jimmy viciously. Oh. Okay, whatever you want. While talking to Victor, Jimmy stretched out his hand to Victor who fell on the ground. Wait a while, let it heal. Victor pointed to his wound and said to Jimmy. Victor didn't want to accidentally leak something after he stood up. After about a minute, Victor got up from the ground. The first thing he did when he got up was a fierce tiger pounce, throwing Jimmy to the ground. You bastard. Victor roared loudly, but Jimmy didn't fight back. After all, it was indeed his own fault, but after the 2 punches, Victor didn't mean to stop. You bastard. Jimmy also struggled repeatedly, easily pushing Victor to the ground. After beating each other violently for about 10 minutes, the two stumbled to their feet from the ground. But Victor, who stood up, looked in a certain direction, where there was a pair of mutants and demon soldiers who died together. What Victor focused on was a young and beautiful female mutant. Seeing this, Jimmy instantly knew what had happened. Patting Victor on the shoulder, Jimmy didn't speak. Jimmy wasn't very comforting, and Victor didn't need comforting in this situation. Any consolation, in the eyes of Victor at this time, is a kind of ridicule. A mockery of my own inadequacy. Jimmy, shall we be witchers in the future? Victor's eyes were a little red. That girl was the first girl Victor fell in love with. Victor thought he could live with her forever. However, I didn't expect. The parting came so quickly. Victor didn't quite understand the concept of a witcher. Victor still heard the title from that lively little girl. Originally, Victor sneered at this profession. Victor planned to rescue Jimmy and take Jimmy to work as a mercenary, and then earn a lot of money to give the person he loves the most a rich living environment. But now, Victor just wants to be a witcher. The witcher who slaughtered all demons. Listen, Victor, what we need now is escape, understand? Hearing Victor's words, although Jimmy didn't want to hit Victor, this was indeed an indisputable fact. What are you afraid of? Victor's self-healing factor is very strong, he can heal almost any kind of injury. However, no matter how powerful the self-healing factor is, there is no way to act on the mind. I'm afraid I can't destroy all the demons. Jimmy left a sentence and walked towards Mel. Mel, who has lost her parents, obviously needs comfort too. Condolences. Coming to Mel's side, Jimmy's lips twitched twice, but in the end he could only choke out these two words. I want revenge. Mel didn't cry, and Mel couldn't even see anything different from the surface. However, if you listen carefully, you can still hear Mel's voice is much colder. Well, pull an organization and you will be the boss. At this time, Jimmy naturally did not dare to sing a different tune. Moreover, it is very simple to establish an organization. There are quite a few survivors left in this demon arena. To build an organization with combat effectiveness, how can it be so? Before Mel finished speaking, he realized that several mutants had appeared in front of him. None of the mutants captured in the Devil's Arena participated in the battle. For no other reason than the holsters around their necks restrict their freedom. It would be a blessing in misfortune not to help the devil. At this time, these people took advantage of the fact that the demons were all dead, and finally found a solution to the leather case, and ran out one after another. How did you guys get rid of the holster? Jimmy looked at the 4 mutants standing in the front row with some doubts. There are a total of 5 manners in this Devil's Arena. It seems that these 4 should be the leaders in each manor. These demons can't control the black flames. There is something like a controller that can control these damn dog holsters. A middle-aged man who looked not young stood up. Obviously, everyone's positioning of the leather case is similar. Did you kill these demons? No, I've seen you. Are you Wolverine? The middle-aged man looked at the messy battlefield in front of him with a little surprise on his face. Yes, man, I'm Wolverine. This is the princess. These demons were killed by the princess's parents. Now I think we should form an organization. What do you think? Jimmy asked the middle-aged man in front of him. Of course, my name is Haji Glai. You can call me Haji. Of course, you can also call me Magneto. In fact, I prefer the name Magneto. The middle-aged man or Magneto stretched out his hand to Jimmy. Jimmy naturally responded politely. I am the Iceman. I'm Pyro. You can call me King Lee. The remaining 3 also came to Jimmy one after another. Seeing this, Mel also introduced himself. Although it is not clearly stated, this organization is considered to be established. And the leaders are the 6 people like Jimmy. Seeing that everyone agreed to the alliance, Jimmy showed a little smile on his face. Looking up at the sky, he found that it was still morning, and Jimmy was not in a hurry, but continued to express his opinions. Since it is established, I think our organization should have a name. What do you think? Of course. Everyone is not in a hurry, the weather is still early, and some details can be finalized, so that the road ahead will be easier. What are you doing? Victor also came behind Jimmy at this time. This is my brother, and the only one who survived among the members who killed the demons this time. Jimmy explained amidst everyone's puzzled eyes. Hearing this, everyone's eyes softened. Victor, we need an organization now, otherwise it would be impossible to kill all the demons with just you and me. Jimmy explained to Victor, and after getting Victor's approval, Jimmy continued to talk to everyone. The first is the name of the organization, and the second is the purpose of the organization. First of all, regarding the name, what do you think of Alpha Organization? The beginning of everything? I think it's good. The middle-aged man was the first to agree, and the others did not refute. Regarding the name, everyone did not have too much request. As long as it's not too harsh. Then, the next step is the purpose of the organization. My opinion is to rush into hell and open an arena in hell. What do you think? Jimmy continued. In fact, when he said it, Jimmy knew that he would not be refuted. First of all, everyone is absolutely full of anger towards the devil and has nowhere to vent. Secondly, this is a big pie, and what everyone cares about is still to come. Sure enough, no one refuted Jimmy's words. Everyone agreed with this purpose or ideal. Then, next is the leader of the organization. In the eyes of everyone expecting, Jimmy finally said what everyone valued most. I think Mel should be the leader. It was her parents who saved you all at the cost of their lives. I think only Mel is qualified to be the leader. Jimmy heard the words, and under the attention of everyone, he pointed to Mel beside him. Forehead. This time, everyone finally reacted. After all, this determines the future status. However, after thinking for a long time, everyone did not think of how to refute. In terms of contribution, Mel's contribution is the greatest, there is no doubt about it. Round strength. With the combination of energy absorption and teleportation, those present are basically mages. In Mel's hands, they can't even go through a round. Although Li Wang sounds like a warrior, his main power is to manipulate gravity. Not to mention Iceman and Pyroman, it can be said that everyone present was restrained to death by Mel. So, even if you want to refute, there is no way. Okay, I agree. Magneto was the first to raise his hand in agreement, followed by a burst of echoes. Then, from now on, Mel will be the leader of the Alpha organization. Of course, future decisions will still be made by everyone. I wish us a happy cooperation in the future. Jimmy explained lightly. Under everyone's satisfied eyes, the Alpha organization was formally established at this moment. As for the weaker mutants, they have no choice but to obey orders. Guys, I need you to collect the leather rings that used to clamp us now, and of course, don't forget the controller. Jimmy walked up to the mutants and said loudly. Hearing Jimmy's words, everyone started to work consciously. Mel, go and fetch your sister, let's go deep into the Rocky Mountains later. Jimmy walked to Mel's side and said to Mel, it is good. When Mel heard this, his figure instantly disappeared in front of Jimmy. The middle-aged man Magneto looked at Jimmy in front of him, his eyes flickering slightly. It was said that Mel became the leader, but Magneto was very sensitive to discover that it was Jimmy who had been issuing orders. However, Magneto didn't say anything. So far, there is nothing wrong with Jimmy's order. And, these are small things. Why go to the Rocky Mountains? Magneto came to Jimmy and asked Jimmy, you can ignore other Magneto, but you must figure out where to go. Before being caught in the arena, Victor and I lived in the Rocky Mountains for 3 years. We are very familiar with it. We can't keep running away. I think we need to fight back, don't we? Okay. Magneto heard the words and agreed. Blindly running away is not Magneto's style. He stretched out his right hand, and an iron fence seemed to be attracted by something, and it appeared in Magneto's hands in the next instant. The slender stick began to deform rapidly, and finally turned into a ball, constantly circling around Magneto. Magneto explained his thoughts with his actions. Including Mel who just left, there are 7 people in total, and none of them is afraid of demons. Before everyone was arrested, they were all under the Black Hands. Therefore, for the devil, everyone's dissatisfaction is much more than fear. After the leather ring was removed, the little fear left disappeared. And Mel was back at this time. As soon as the brought little Lori Kyle appeared, her eye circles immediately turned red. Facing 2 sentences among the many corpses, Kyle quickly ran over. Dad. Mom. No. Don't. Little Lolita's cries were miserable, but when she was 7 or 8 years old, when she encountered such a thing. I go. Jimmy still wanted to feel emotional in his heart, but Jimmy felt as if his brain had been hit by a heavy hammer. This is. Ability awakened. Vaguely, Jimmy could still see that the surrounding corpses seemed to be floating unsteadily, and now it was confirmed that the little girl had definitely awakened her ability. It still looks like power, a particularly powerful force. Jimmy, whose mental strength was several times that of ordinary people, resisted the stinging pain in his head, and appeared beside the little girl in a flash. Sorry. After saying something softly, Jimmy went up with a knife in his hand, and the little girl was so soft that he fell into Jimmy's arms. The terrifying thoughts disappeared, and the affected mutants hesitated for a moment before continuing to move. Soon, everything was packed, and Jimmy handed Kyle in his arms to Mel. Shall we destroy this place? The demon arena itself is nothing more than an ordinary building. Amidst the anger of many mutants, this demon arena was completely turned into ruins. Go. Jimmy waved his hand, and everyone ran towards the Rocky Mountains together. The thought energy in his hand was condensed, and he threw it at Mel with a flick of his hand. Mel, who was running, did not dodge or dodge, and was directly hit by this thought. However, not only was Mel not affected in the slightest, but his speed increased a lot. Seeing this, Jimmy no longer paid attention to Mel, stepped on his long legs, and galloped on the road. Suddenly, Jimmy felt that there seemed to be some shadows above his head. Looking up suspiciously, only to find that it was Magneto and Li Wang who brought some flying mutants and followed them unhurriedly. Jimmy. I must learn to fly. Jimmy thought so in his heart, but he continued to run forward without the slightest pause. Everyone did not hide their tracks, a mighty group of mutants ran on the street, attracting countless people to watch. But no one would care about this. When I was alone, I naturally had to hide and hide. But now there are organizations, so many of the same kind, Why don't they die? Steel is done. Ordinary people can only hide aside when they see such a scene. Even people who have occasionally seen mutants before, or even tortured and killed mutants, dare not speak at this moment, and can only hide in despair. Quietly watching this group of monsters gallop away in front of him. Going to the Rocky Mountains is also the way Jimmy thought of in desperation. The entire demon arena is gone, which will definitely attract Mammon's attention. However, Mammon should not be allowed to take action in person. At most, he should send a lord or something to hunt him down. Therefore, Jimmy must find a suitable battlefield and kill the pursuers from hell. Jimmy didn't know the division of power in hell, and the strength of the Lord, and Jimmy didn't have a concept in his mind. However, Jimmy can be sure that the pursuers sent out will definitely not be weaker than the people stationed in the Devil's Arena. Therefore, the collected leather cases will come in handy. What Jimmy has to do is to use the hellfire contained in these leather cases to kill the pursuers. Although Jimmy believes that people like himself can kill them, there is no doubt that he will pay a high price. Jimmy is not afraid. After all, it is really difficult for Jimmy to want to die. However, each of these mutants who escaped from the Devil's Arena has rare combat power. Jimmy couldn't bear to let them die. For the fire of hell, Jimmy doesn't have too much extravagant hope, as long as he can kill some of the pursuers. The ultimate goal is to draw Mammon out. Yes, this is Jimmy's ultimate goal. Be sure to seduce Mammon, the boss who at least has the quasi-heavenly father level, so that Guyi will make a move. Guardians of the Earth are not kidding you. It's fine to send 1 or 2 lords to turn a blind eye, if someone like Mammon came to the Earth. Guyi could no longer remain indifferent. There are no weak people in the Alpha organization. These are fighters who have survived several bloody battles. Not to mention anything else, the speed is not slow. Soon, under the leadership of Jimmy, they plunged into the thousands of miles of Rocky Mountains. At this time, it was almost noon. Without stopping, Jimmy's goal is the cave where he and Victor lived together. After another hour or 2 of long-distance raiding, everyone finally came to this hidden cave. Everyone. Let's bury all the leather cases in this cave. Jimmy shouted to the mutants behind him. When everyone heard the words and saw that their boss did not raise any doubts, they all ran into the cave and got busy. If you want to rely on this kind of trap, you need them to go in first. This time it was Li Wang who spoke. Li Wang was a young woman who still looked charming, about 30 years old. Blonde, blue-eyed, classic European and American beauty. I'll be the bait. Jimmy heard the words and said lightly, this is also a decision that Jimmy made early in the morning. Okay. As soon as these words came out, all eyes were on Jimmy. How do you seduce them? Magneto asked Jimmy. Demons are not idiots. On the contrary, under the leadership of Mephisto, who is famous for his cunning, these demons are also quite cunning. Otherwise, they wouldn't have devised various means to maximize the benefits of the arena. Of course, none of you present knew that the leader of hell was Mephisto, except for Jimmy. When Jimmy heard this, a smile was drawn on the corner of his mouth. The hands are standing upright in front of the chest with sword fingers, which is the standard handprint for fighters to control mind energy. It is also the only fingerprint. The thoughts in the body began to circulate, and a clone exactly like Jimmy appeared beside Jimmy. How about this? Jimmy asked the people around him with a smile on his face. Neonki Avatar. Use the mind energy to form a clone that is indistinguishable from the main body, and disappear after a period of time or after suffering a certain amount of damage. The main function is to confuse the enemy. It belongs to Nian Wang's skill, which has the follow-up skill Phantom Burst in the branch skill Nian Chi Mask. Currently, Jimmy does not know any of them, and the utility of the avatar is also very low, although it has similar defensive power to the main body. However, he won't move. Although there are all kinds of shortcomings, but in the current situation, we can only bite the bullet. Hey! Are you Wolverine? Suddenly, a young man came to Jimmy. Huh? What's wrong? When Jimmy heard this, he was taken aback for a moment, not knowing what this guy was looking for him for. Look. The young man quickly explained his purpose. I saw that the young man was motionless, but there were many clones appearing from behind the young man. Well. Then I'll leave it to you. Seeing this, Jimmy frowned and patted the young man on the shoulder. Turning around, he said to Mel, you can absorb this. Jimmy pointed to the clone he had just separated. Mel shrugged when he heard the words, and walked to the clone that Jimmy had created. He didn't let go of Kyle in his arms, and touched the clone with a finger. After a while, the clone disappeared completely. Okay. Hand over the controller to this guy, and everyone will retreat with me. Mel ordered to the people around him with a serious face. It is an order, there is no doubt about it. Mel's sudden strength caught everyone by surprise. Jimmy naturally chose to be obedient. After all, Jimmy and Mel were originally in the same camp. Jimmy showed his attitude, and Victor naturally showed his attitude. Seeing this, Magneto and the others hesitated for a moment, but also chose to accept it. After all, everyone accepted Mel as the leader at the beginning. So everyone started to retreat quickly. No one knew when the Hell's pursuers would come. Did you not hear the order? Mel looked at the clone who was still standing still. The doppelganger was taken aback when he heard the words, and raised the Hellfire controller in his hand up and down, not knowing what to say for a moment. Can you give the controller to your clone? Mel frowned and continued to ask. Jimmy could hear the eagerness in Mel's tone. This was the first time Jimmy heard such a tone from Mel in more than 3 months. No, my avatar can't be too far away from me. The doppelganger spread his hands. Jimmy, Kyle will leave it to you. Upon hearing this, Mel sighed deeply, and handed Kyle into Jimmy's hands. Jimmy took it almost subconsciously. Shall I stay too? Jimmy said to Mel. After letting a girl stay here, Jimmy felt that he couldn't do such a thing. It's okay, I have teleportation, and I can rest assured that my sister will leave it to you. Mel heard the words and did not agree. Jimmy is too anxious, and the organization formed in this way has no centripetal force at all. And now I am the leader of the organization, whether everyone wants to admit it or not, but for now, it is me in name. Therefore, Mel couldn't let go of any opportunity to win people's hearts. Victor, I'll leave her to you. Jimmy immediately said to Victor when he heard the words. Don't let her get hurt. Jimmy looked at Victor in front of him, their eyes collided slightly, and Victor nodded seriously. Jimmy trusts Victor, and Victor will naturally trust Jimmy. This is the trust that the two have cultivated in the mountains for 3 years. He is my own brother. Jimmy explained to Mel, and Mel stared slightly, then nodded. When Victor heard Jimmy say this, a happy smile appeared on his face. This is the first time that Jimmy has admitted his identity, and Victor feels very happy, very very happy. Victor took Kyle and left, along with Magneto and the others. In fact, although Magneto and the others feel that it is a shame to obey Mel's words, their bodies are still very honest. The experience of the Devil's Arena did not make these mutants bloodthirsty and cruel. On the contrary, they cherish their lives more. Jimmy, come with me. Mel looked at the sky and felt that the devil would not be chasing him so quickly, so he greeted Jimmy and walked to the side alone. When Jimmy heard the words, he didn't say much, and obediently followed Mel and walked to the side. Only the doppelganger was left staring at the spot. Can you tell me your plan? Mel looked up at Jimmy, his emerald green eyes were full of seriousness. I think there should be an organization dedicated to fighting these supernatural beings in the world. Jimmy couldn't talk about Gui and Kamatage for no other reason. Based on his own knowledge, he shouldn't have known such a high-level existence as Kamatage. So, that's all Jimmy can say. If you want to make noise, why don't you go to a crowded place? In this case, Jimmy has no way to pick it up. There is no other reason. Jimmy is just afraid that if he really does that, the world may collapse. When time travel came, Jimmy remembered that the internet literature world was not peaceful. At this time, the news also spread to Hell. Here is an ancient castle that is somewhat similar to a popular castle hundreds of years ago. The castle looks very big, and the surrounding environment is also very beautiful. Therefore, this castle must be very expensive, although the surrounding environment is no different from the ordinary mountain scenery in the world. However, it is not easy to find such an environment in Hell. This is probably equivalent to a Seaview villa. My lord, the Loki branch of the demon arena has been destroyed. What about the money? Mammon didn't even lift her eyelids. This demon who symbolizes money obviously only cares about money. In Dante's hands. Where's Dante? Died. What about the money? The Hell has sent troops, and the money is in Dante's hands. Although Dante is dead, the money is still there, so the Hell sent troops very quickly. The money is in the Devil's Arena, and if you go there early, you may be able to get it back. If you go late, the audience won't care whose money it is. Sent out are a family of cave dwellers who overcame Jimmy's fear of insects. Although, cave demons have been to the dueling ring once. However, this race is one of the most famous races in Hell. Those who were photographed in the arena were nothing more than discarded waste. The real cave-dwelling devil is one of Mammon's trump cards. Its patriarch, Arnoel Angeli, is one of the most powerful men under Mammon, second only to the Death Knight and the Lich King. The main reason why Mammon sent Angeli was because cave demons could travel underground. In this way, there will be no panic, and Gui will be prevented from attacking as much as possible. Angeli did not exist in this world. Although Angeli did not have any official position, but as one of Mammon's strongest thugs, Gui would definitely not ignore Angeli's appearance. Therefore, Langert, one of Angeli's deputy, led the team. An existence stronger than West, the boss of the demon arena. Arriving at the devil's arena in a mighty way, a group of people were separated to carry the goods, and the soldiers were divided into two groups. Langert led his clansmen and chased toward the Rocky Mountains in a mighty way. Of course, it's underneath. Obviously, Langert didn't want to provoke Gui's bottom line, and he didn't want his troops to confront the madmen of Kamatage. They seemed to be coming. Jimmy's nose twitched slightly, and Jimmy's keen sense of smell made him smell the peculiar smell immediately. Hide it well. When Mel heard this, his face became more serious. Whether those hellfires can work depends on whether they can escape their detection. At the same time, Mel's hand held Jimmy's hand, and Jimmy held the clone's hand. Obviously, this is ready to run at any time, coming. Jimmy's breathing became weaker. The three of them hid behind a bush. It was early spring now, but the grass that had just sprouted gave them excellent cover. The three of them are consciously restraining their breathing. Although it was useless, the three people who lurked for the first time still did so. There was a slight sound of ground breaking, and Jimmy scratched his head carefully. Now Jimmy is particularly dissatisfied with his inheritance. If it was Nianwang, Nianqi perception would definitely be able to know their actions without showing their heads. It's a pity that it's useless even if Jimmy complains. No matter how much he complains, the perception of weakness will not become the perception of energy. Fortunately, the three of Jimmy were far enough away that Jimmy's peeping behavior was not discovered. This is already the limit distance that the clone can control. In Jimmy's eyes, the army of cave-dwelling demons has almost turned into a small black spot. And Jimmy's main thing is to watch. There are a few little black dots going into the cave. Angeli appeared in this deserted place, and his intuition told Angeli that there were many people inside. However, for some reason, Angeli felt something was wrong. Looking at the narrow opening, Angeli neither moved forward nor retreated, and froze in place for a moment. In the end, Angeli decided to send a small team in to investigate first. Under Angeli's order, a pair of cave-dwelling demons slowly sneaked into the ground. This ensures that all troglodytes in the squad can be in the cave at the same time. This minimizes damage as much as possible. This is also Angeli's consistent style of using troops. In Jimmy's eyes, he saw three small black spots slowly disappearing in front of him. In such a situation, Jimmy naturally knew what happened. I'm not going to look at it now, and count to 3 in my heart. The hand holding the avatar was clenched violently, and the avatar pressed the controller in his hand very sensibly. Seeing this, Mel didn't hesitate at all, and activated teleportation, and the three of them disappeared here in an instant. The next moment, the flames of hell erupted suddenly. The amount of hellfire contained in the leather ring of an entire arena is quite large. Those ordinary rocks can't stop the fire from hell, which is famous throughout the universe. The flames of hell that erupted completely enveloped Angeli's troops in it. On Jimmy's side, the three returned to the place where the main force was staying, and it was even found that Kyle hadn't woken up yet. Go. Mel stretched out his hand to Magneto and the others. Magneto, a shameless old man, held Mel's hand unceremoniously. This made Jimmy very uncomfortable. Li Wang hesitated for a moment, came to Jimmy's side and held Jimmy's hand. After all, relatively speaking, Jimmy's appearance is much better than that of Magneto. Everyone got ready, and the next moment, the 6 of them appeared at the place where Mel had just left. At this time, the pitch-black hellfire was still burning. The cave demon's casualties were obviously not small, or in other words, there were still fighting strength, except for Angeli, who looked huge but was full of scars. There are only some peripheral members who stand far away. Generally speaking, these members who are relatively peripheral, generally have poor combat effectiveness. When the pitch-black hellfire erupted in front of Angeli, Angeli understood that he had been tricked. No wonder I didn't find the controller in the Devil's Arena. West is a waste. After thinking about it, Angeli still sensibly hid underground in the face of the erupting hellfire. And dive away while diving. Of course, the speed is very fast, and the damage of hellfire to hell creatures is no less than the damage to Jimmy. Jimmy has a self-healing factor and Gui resists him, but Angeli has nothing. Somewhat embarrassed, they crawled out of the ground. As soon as they came out, Angeli found mutants standing in a row. Impressively, it was Jimmy, Mel and others. Your means are really good. Angeli looked at Mel, the leader, with a very calm tone. If there is such a big movement here, the patriarch who is watching here will definitely know and send reinforcements. Although such a large loss was caused, he would definitely be punished if he went back. However, compared to being punished and throwing his life here, Angeli is more inclined to go back and be punished. So, now Angeli is trying to calm down her tone. This can procrastinate a bit longer, is acceptable. Before Mel could speak, Jimmy had already made a fuss, and before the words fell, Jimmy's feet had already appeared in front of Angeli. Whip legs. This is not a skill in the inheritance of Emperor Wu, but it is an opening kick that Jimmy likes to use most. Jimmy doesn't want to waste his hard-earned advantage in talking about it. If Mel can't let go of his face, let him do it. Jimmy doesn't mind that his character collapses a little bit. Anyway, it's about to collapse completely. Jimmy made a move, and other people naturally couldn't watch. There were 5 remnant soldiers behind Angeli. Seeing that their boss was attacked, they spit out a green spider web one after another. The spider web covered the sky and spread towards Jimmy, but at this moment, Jimmy had already stamped his feet on Angeli's face. Angeli didn't expect that this guy would shoot directly without saying a word. Without noticing for a moment, the huge body soared into the air, but it was kicked out by Jimmy abruptly. The golden light burst out from his body, and Jimmy continued to chase and kill Angeli without even looking at the spiderweb. Gale combo. This move is not very powerful, but just like his name, it is extremely fast. The spiderweb fell in midair, but found a ball of mixed iron, which blocked the iron web with lightning speed, and did not break the tough spiderweb, but flew to other places with the spiderweb. The place. At this time, Jimmy's pair of bone claws also pierced Angeli's body, and his hands were hard. What? With a loud shout, and along with Angeli's screams, Angeli's entire body instantly turned into a rain of blood. Flames appeared on the solid ice, and the remaining defeated soldiers were wiped out under the fierce attack of soldiers and firemen. They were suppressed by King Li, and they didn't even have the ability to resist. You can only stand where you are and be beaten passively. Looking at the giant spider that had been torn apart by him, Jimmy smiled silently. Does this fit my character setting? Wu Ji's fighting style is to burst out the greatest damage in the shortest time. Kill all enemies that stand in your way. Looking back, Jimmy saw everyone's smiling faces. This battle happened very quickly, and it ended very quickly. Almost in the blink of an eye, the battle was over. The few Trog demons that remain are far too few. Moreover, they were more or less affected by the flames of hell. Especially Angeli, who stood at the front. It can be said that even Jimmy alone can solve these cave demons. Still, Jimmy enjoyed the feeling of teamwork. Whether it is a human or a wolf, they are all social animals. Looking back at his teammates behind him, Jimmy had a knowing smile on his face. Everyone was obviously in a good mood, and there was a look of contentment in their shining eyes. I've been in a disgusting place like the Devil's Arena for a long time. I suddenly enjoyed the thrill of teamwork, and no one didn't like this feeling. Of course, this is just the beginning. If something goes wrong later, it will naturally cause the entire team to fall apart. Looking at the cave that had been razed to the ground, Jimmy glanced at it with a little bit of reluctance. After all, it was the place where I had stayed for 3 full years. With a sigh, Jimmy silently came to Angeli, who had lost his breath of life. Enduring the nausea, Jimmy remembered the smell. The smell of the devil. A canine nose simply surpasses human cognition. Especially after being strengthened by Nian Qi. The 6 people joined together again, and with a flash, they returned to the gathering place. In fact, it is said to be a gathering place, but it doesn't look like home at all. Some helplessly forgot to glance in a certain direction. Why didn't Ji Yi make a move? Jimmy really wants to study at Karmatage for a while. Although Jimmy looked down on Karmatage's combat effectiveness, of course, except for Ji Yi. However, the knowledge of Karmatage is quite useful. You know, Karmatage's introductory spell is space magic. Moreover, mages, as the name suggests, must strengthen the soul. Although Jimmy's soul quality is much better than others because of time travel. However, with the slow but never stagnant progress of the steel and iron bones, the soul has become Jimmy's shortcoming. As a perfectionist, Jimmy doesn't want to have any shortcomings. And, to be honest, Jimmy wasn't very happy with his bone claws. In Jimmy's impression, Steel Claw is the most handsome. So, Jimmy has a less certain expectation. That is, you can find a more reliable way to solve your claw problem in Karmatage. Finally, the Time Stone, also known as the Eye of Agamotto, is the reason Jimmy most wants to join Karmatage. Of course, in a few decades, Jimmy can also choose to participate in World War E and get the Space Gem. However, wouldn't it be nice to join the portal of Karmatage Society and take the Space Gem directly? The last one, that is, as long as Karmatage is added, Jimmy doesn't have to worry about demons anymore. Just when Jimmy was thinking about Gu was also watching Jimmy. Ancient One is also very helpless now. Mephisto in hell has been eyeing the earth. If it was other demon gods, Gu might have gone up and killed them directly. But, that's Mephisto after all. Although Mephisto has always been known for his cunning in the multiverse. However, the shocking battle between Mephisto and Tun Xing shocked many people. Ancient One is naturally among them. There is no doubt that Swallowing Star is beyond the existence of Heavenly Father. Gu thought that he was not an opponent, and it might be difficult for him to hold on. However, Mephisto forced a 50-50 split in the face of Swallowing Stars. If you want to compare with the American team that was split 50-50 later, Mephisto will definitely beat the American team by a universe. This is still an external worry, and Karmatage also has great hidden dangers inside. His disciple, Karl Modu, seems to have a sense of justice. Modu in this book is set in comics, however, Gu could see the ambition in Modu's heart. Plus the Dormammu that suddenly appeared more than 100 years ago. Gu is in a very complicated mood now. She must find a suitable heir. And Jimmy is the most suitable one. His soul strength is several times or even 10 times higher than that of ordinary people, which ensures Jimmy's strength in learning magic. The most important thing is Jimmy's own fighting power. All of Jimmy's fights in the Devil's Arena were watched by Gu. So, naturally, the existence of Jimmy replaced the original heir in Gu's heart, Slantage. However, Gu does not intend to take Jimmy under his command now. Gu hoped that Jimmy, who could come to his Karmatage, would have a fighting power second only to himself. Angeli died, and Yunal, who was deep in hell, knew the news immediately. Anger rose from Yanner's heart. Angeli's trash and the behavior of those mutants made Yunal very angry. Even now, Yanor wants to personally lead the troops to crush the group of ants to death. However, with such an idea, Yunal only dared to think about it. As the second in command of hell, Yanal's strength ranks first in the entire hell. Yunal can also know that if he dares to appear in the human world, then it will be equivalent to starting a war with the human world. Yunal would not dare to go without the order from above. And at this time, a girl holding a bow and arrow appeared in Yanner's barracks. Although Gu did not make a move, which made Jimmy very unhappy, but the matter in front of him must continue to be done. A large group of mutants have been brought here and need to survive. No one wanted to go out. It's pretty good here, with mountains, waters and woods. In short, you can't die of hunger. After all, everyone is a fighting mutant. However, there are still many things to do, such as building houses, building defensive offensives, and even developing animal husbandry. If you rely on the mountains and eat the mountains, you will fall down. And, if possible, Jimmy didn't want his organization to be in this primitive society. Outdoors without black technology, I am ashamed to say that I am a mutant organization with an international style when I go out. However, looking at this group of guys with full fighting talents, Jimmy's head hurts a little uncontrollably. Forget it. Take your time. Jimmy didn't expect that a good Marvel would be turned into a farming game by himself. However, Mel's sister Kyle woke up at this time. The stone houses are located next to the small lake, and the work efficiency of the mutants is really high. Even if these are mutants who are inclined to fight, there is nothing wrong with doing these civilian jobs. For example, Li Wangai can be used as an engineering team by himself. With a wave of your hand, you can build a wooden house in 2 minutes. And like Jimmy, although the strength is not inferior to I, but when it comes to infrastructure, Jimmy can't do it. So Jimmy and Victor went about their business. There is also a group of mutants who are not good at infrastructure, and they went hunting with Jimmy. In the evening, Jimmy, who had returned from hunting, had already discovered that the base was already in decent shape. The stone house, surrounded by walls, is built against the mountain, facing the small lake. Walking into the base, throwing the prey in their hands on the ground, Jimmy and Victor walked towards Mel and the others. The 7 people who were initially identified as high-level people met at the door. It is worth mentioning that there is a pretty little loli standing beside Mel. Blonde, delicate and lovely. However, the indifference on his face was daunting. This is a very cute little loli, but it is not lovable. Came back. Came back. Several people looked at each other and smiled, and walked into the relatively large room located in the center of the base. This is the center of the base. After all, it is located in the deep mountains and old forests, and electricity is impossible. Therefore, although the house looks very large, it is illuminated by torches. It's okay. Just a little weaker than the kerosene lamps in the outside world. Although the battery has been invented, electricity has also been discovered. But the light bulb was still years away. The house is big, and there are many rooms in it. This house is currently the largest and most complicated house in the entire Alpha organization. It took about an hour for the prey was being processed in full swing outside, and it was already dark. Everyone is preparing to have a bonfire party or something in the evening. In the command center, Jimmy and others sat on a large round table made of stone and began to discuss the direction of future development. After nearly an hour of discussion, everyone has a similar plan for the future. The current state of the base is fine. Without any major technological breakthroughs, there is no future for the development of infrastructure. In addition, a search and rescue team needs to be formed to search for mutants wandering outside. The current Alpha organization has really strong combat effectiveness. Almost all the high-level people are 4th-level mutants. In the constant life and death battle, Magneto and others have reached a certain level of control over their abilities. The other members are also very powerful. Pulling it out and cutting through a battlefield head-on is no problem at all. In fact, it is not a big problem to chisel a few more at a time. However, an organization cannot only have combat members, but also infrastructure members. Now, the technology is not yet in place, and there is not even a light bulb, so there is no problem at all for the Alpha organization to set up camp here so ostentatiously. However, when World War E is over, if the Alpha organization is still at this level of technology, trouble is absolutely inevitable. Therefore, the organization needs fresh blood. Various types of members are required to join. In the end, regarding the pursuit of Hell, everyone agreed that Hell would never let it go. Therefore, a total of 6 people need to work shifts at night to ensure that others can sleep peacefully. Victor wasn't counted by Jimmy. Victor's strength may not be bad, but in the organization of this group of heroes, Victor's combat effectiveness is really not outstanding. Facing the elites in Hell, they have made a lot of achievements. Remaining immortal is the self-healing factor against the sky. However, Victor also has his own way to improve. Keep exercising. Train yourself to death. You won't die anyway, and the self-healing factor will continue to work, and it will continue to become stronger. Because Jimmy is making progress every day, Victor has a deep obsession with becoming stronger. I'm an older brother. These are the exact words of Victor. In fact, Jimmy wanted Victor to go to Kunlun for a try. It really suited Victor there. An immortal martial artist, just thinking about it is crazy. Finally, members of the Alpha group also need to be grouped. Classify the abilities of each mutant in order to know them and make good use of them. In short, the future planning is basically determined in this way. Now that business is settled, everyone is ready to go out and enjoy a fun evening. Just when everyone wants to leave, a pretty voice sounded from the hall. I need a lab. As soon as these words came out, the corners of Jimmy's eyes twitched. He turned around and looked at Kyle in surprise. What do you want to study? Jimmy controlled his excitement and asked Kyle calmly. Electromechanical. The little girl spoke concisely, and she didn't know if it was always like this, or because she lost her family. Okay. Leave the lab to me, but I need you to help me research a topic. Jimmy heard the words and said lightly, Jimmy wants to fly. After the words fell, Jimmy waited for Kyle's answer. Unexpectedly, Kyle didn't pay attention to Jimmy's meaning, but looked at his sister, Mel. Well, I'll bring your workbench tomorrow, and I'll leave the lab to I. Mel stood up and said to Kingsley. Obviously, the help of Liwing is inseparable from the construction of the experimental platform. Of course, the help of Burning Man may be needed later. But it is not needed at present. What is needed now is infrastructure. Basic construction. While speaking, Mel also glanced provocatively at Jimmy beside him. Jimmy. Jimmy is not a shameless person, and he is even more shameless in front of Mel. Call the Queen. Mel said lightly, leaned back, raised his legs, and looked down at Jimmy. Obviously, this is Mel's new title. No, Mel, how can you do this? We are an organization. Jimmy said angrily. In fact, Jimmy doesn't care about this, but he can't agree easily. He must maximize the value of the word queen. Disperse. Queen. Mel was not moved by it, and Jimmy stood up and yelled out before the word was over. Well, you're so cute, let's talk about it. Mel held his head high in enjoyment. I need the theoretical knowledge of electromagnetism, the most comprehensive. Jimmy heard the words and said it quickly. In his previous life, Jimmy liked Iron Man very much, so Jimmy wanted to abuse Iron Man. In fact, apart from being an internet writer in his previous life, Jimmy was mainly a student. Students of mechatronics. However, let's not say that I haven't watched it in the past few years. Even before the time travel, Jimmy still had a half knowledge of his professional knowledge. Jimmy wants to fly. After he has already mastered how to convert thoughts into lightning, it is most reliable to generate magnetism through electricity, and then use the magnetic field to make himself fly. However, Jimmy knows the theory that electricity generates magnetism and magnetism generates electricity, but Jimmy doesn't know the details. Now Jimmy can only vaguely remember that it seems to be related to the direction of the current, but Jimmy has long forgotten what happened specifically. Or rather, Jimmy never understood. So, Jimmy needs Kyle's help. In fact, Jimmy can also ask Magneto for advice and master this method directly through practice. However, Jimmy is not familiar with Magneto. Relatively speaking, in Jimmy's heart, Mel is his own. After the matter was settled, everyone walked out of the command center one after another. At this time, the outside was already bustling. The raging fire seems to symbolize the joy in everyone's heart. 5 brown bears were placed on the bonfire, and around the 5 bonfires were mutants who once lived in a manor. Obviously, although everyone is now an alpha organization in name. However, in fact, it is still divided into camps. And the few people who just discussed the matter came to the side of their subordinates. Intimacy is different. Singing, dancing, eating meat, the only shortcoming is that there is no wine. But it doesn't matter, everyone's cheerful heart is hard to hide. Jimmy was assigned a huge bear leg. Instead of participating in the carnival of dozens of people, he quietly came under a big tree, leaned against the tree, looked into the distance, and was in a daze. There are a lot of fighters in the Alpha organization now. Just for these 5 bonfires, there are nearly 100 people around each bonfire. It is roughly estimated that the current Alpha organization has more than 400 members. The number of people seems to be large, and the strength of the Alpha organization can completely blow up the fraternity of the future Magneto or the genius school of Professor X. However, Jimmy is now very worried. Although the current Alpha organization's combat effectiveness is quite good, but in the face of Hell's pursuit, Jimmy didn't know what to say. Silently planting the bear's leg on the ground, a cloud of thunder appeared on Jimmy's hand. Yi, who was originally given hope by Jimmy, did not make a move, so Jimmy can only rely on himself. Lightning is a good thing, not only has the lethality not weaker than flames, but also has many characteristics. Like, vertigo? Breakdown. For Jimmy, the best feature is the method of electromagnetism in the way to stimulate the potential of the body. Jimmy once watched a cartoon in his previous life, which contained many skills about lightning. For example, Kieran, Rachel, Thunder Escape Armor? These are all good ways to use lightning. Jimmy also intends to borrow ideas from it. In fact, many ideas are useless. Like Lei Qi, Jimmy is not Nian Huang after all. Relatively speaking, he uses not a lot of Nian Qi in his body to condense thunder and lightning. It's better to punch directly. Simple and efficient. What Jimmy really wants to practice is the latent armor. Use lightning to stimulate your body, increase your speed, and increase your strength. As for defense or something, Jimmy didn't really care. Jimmy, whose self-healing factor has reached level 4, is really a little swollen. Turning the thoughts into lightning, Jimmy slowly closed his eyes. Feel the thunder and lightning raging in the body. The external situation is that Jimmy's entire body is covered with a layer of thunder. He worked hard to control the lightning in his body and turned it around twice in the body according to the operation method of the Overlord armor. The lightning armor that Jimmy came up with was considered a successful research. The effect is to slightly increase Jimmy's basic attributes, provide stronger defense, and give a profound lesson to enemies who like melee combat. Of course, the effect of dominance has not been lost. In short, this is a very practical skill. That is to say, Jimmy can restore this ability so quickly. If it is an ordinary person, the first step is already dead. This is also why the Thunder Dungeon armor is Union's signature in that anime. Even so, his reasoning is simple, and Jimmy's situation here was also seen by Mel. Putting down the food in his hands, Mel came to Jimmy's side. "Aren't you going to have fun with everyone?" Mel sat next to Jimmy. "No, I'm not very sociable." Jimmy heard the words, leaned on the big tree and said. "A little numb. Then what are you doing here?" Mel shrugged and didn't comment on Jimmy's words. "I'll think about when the hell's pursuers will come," Jimmy said with a smile, but this joke made Mel fall silent. Looking back at the people who were having fun, Mel still couldn't bear to ask them to stop. "Go ahead. I'll keep an eye on it." Jimmy shrugged his shoulders and said that he should not worry about himself. In such a short time, the damage caused by lightning to himself no longer existed. Auxiliary skill. Okay. Mel heard the words and got up to leave, but the moment he turned around, he found a mutant lying on the ground. What? Seeing this, Mel's eyes narrowed slightly, and he glanced at the people who were still reveling unaware at this time, and shouted loudly. "Stop." Mel's voice was loud, and everyone looked at Mel with doubts. Seeing this, Mel walked towards the crowd, but Jimmy didn't go there. Jimmy saw that scene, but Jimmy didn't see anything. Not even a taste. Glancing at where the arrow came from, Jimmy got up and walked to the corpse. Peeved. Suddenly, an arrow appeared on Jimmy's chest. But Jimmy, who was squatting halfway beside the corpse, relaxed his frown. "I smell you." Jimmy looked in a certain direction, and his nose twitched slightly, only to find that the smell had disappeared again. Standing up, Jimmy looked at the mutants behind him. But he found that everyone was looking at him in shock. Forehead. Reaching out to pull out the arrow in his chest, Jimmy called Victor. "Choose a mutant whose direction is similar to ours, and catch that guy." "No problem." Victor heard this, turned around and went to look for the team members. And in the dark woods, a pair of eyes slowly disappeared around here. Dark Ranger, Varna. An unsuccessful ranger in hell, good at all kinds of black magic and long-range sniper killing. "If you were shot through your chest with an arrow, would you die?" Jimmy looked at the team members who had just been selected by Victor and asked seriously. Meeting. Everyone's answers were very neat. Obviously, although they also tend to strengthen beasts, they don't have the perverted recovery ability like Jimmy and Victor. Then, go back to sleep. When Jimmy heard this, he raised his eyebrows, indicating that such a person is unnecessary. Jimmy knew nothing about the mysterious killer. It is said to go out to hunt and kill, but in fact it is to go out to try their luck. When the enemy is clear and we are dark, it is natural to be attacked. Calling a group of people out is for brainstorming, not to add casualties. Jimmy didn't know when GUE would make a move, so Jimmy had to plan for GUE not to make a move. These fighters, if there is one less casualty, one less casualty. Forget it. I'll go by myself. He took a deep breath, stopped Victor who wanted to follow, and Jimmy walked out alone. Out of the fence, Jimmy picked a direction at random and walked out. In fact, Jimmy doesn't know where the enemy is, but what Jimmy wants is for the enemy to bite him. As long as she wants to kill herself, she must show her face. For now, Jimmy is really a bit confident. If you can't be beaten to death, you are so emboldened. Although I don't know where to go, and I don't know where the enemy is. However, Jimmy already had a clear battle plan in his heart. Find the enemy, kill the enemy, it's over. The cold moonlight shone on the ground, and Jimmy walked alone in the dense jungle, making a rustling sound. When I came out of the mountain, I was still wrapped in silver, and I stayed in the Devil Arena for 3 months. Now it is late spring and early summer. He released his aura undisguisedly, just to keep the bugs hidden in the jungle away from him. Still afraid of bugs. Although it feels a bit embarrassing, Jimmy really can't change it for a while. Do your best. As Jimmy expected, it is impossible for Varna to let Jimmy, a big fish, go. In fact, before Varna made a move, she had already conducted a comprehensive survey of the base that had just been built for less than 5 hours. With only Kyle, a newly awakened mutant with sentience ability, Varna easily completed the investigation. As for Jimmy's identity, Varna also knew about it. To be honest, Varna did not expect Jimmy to come out so carelessly. It also made Varna ecstatic. If you can kill solo, naturally it is best to kill solo. After all, Varna is only one person. However, before that, Varna needs to conduct a small test. Varna's eyes were on the brown bear not far away. When the two were fighting wits, neither Jimmy nor Varna knew that in the distant Karma Taj, a bald head was watching the scene here. GUE is not in a hurry now, only GUE knows what kind of power is contained in Jimmy's seemingly weak body. Moreover, the earth is very stable now, and Jimmy has enough time to improve his strength. Therefore, Ji Yi now has enough time to observe this young man. Before that, Ji Yi needs to have a general understanding of Jimmy, so as to formulate a special training plan. Just like Strange in the original Time and Space, throw him to Mount Everest to practice the portal? Walking alone in the deserted wilderness, the moonlight is like a waterfall, and the insects are singing. However, after a long time, Jimmy was still a little annoyed. Although canids have the most outstanding patience. However, Jimmy is not an animal after all, although his mutant direction is approaching the canine family. So, Jimmy just sat down on the ground. To be honest, Jimmy was a little hungry. There are still some differences between Marvel and Shenxia. For example, mutants, even if you are strong enough to destroy the world, you still cannot live forever, and you cannot live without food. You will get drunk when you drink alcohol, and you will die if you get cancer. Tut tut. And Jimmy, before coming out, didn't eat much. The bare leg assigned to him is still stuck under the big tree. Rubbing his stomach, Jimmy looked at the bright moon in the sky helplessly. Jimmy couldn't figure out why this guy didn't make a move. I came out alone, and I didn't dare to make a move. Is it too conscientious? Roar. Just when Jimmy was playing with the pebbles on the ground boredly, a deep growl came into Jimmy's ears. Oh. Come on, baby. Jimmy turned his head to look at the source of the voice, but met a pair of blood-red eyes. Huh? A brown bear with red eyes? Jimmy was taken aback for a moment. Couldn't he restrain his artificial heart? That's nice. He quickly got up from the ground, and slowly stretched out a pair of bone claws. The steps under his feet changed, and the distance between Jimmy and the brown bear was quickly shortened. Roar. Accompanied by a hoarse roar, the brown bear, who didn't know what had happened, lost the breath of life. Pulling the bone claw out of the brown bear's body, Jimmy wiped his own bone claw on the brown bear's shiny black body. Jimmy didn't want to bleed like this brown bear. In case of cancer, Jimmy didn't know if he would survive. It is said that Modu in the comics died of cancer in the end. Jimmy's way of killing the brown bear like an antelope's horns made Varna, who was hiding in the dark, startled slightly. However, even so, Varna quickly drew her bow and set her arrows. An arrow that glowed blue in the dark flew towards Jimmy. Just when Jimmy and Varna fought, a small incident happened at the base. The flesh and blood from the corpse of the mutant who was shot by Varna quickly faded away. After a while, a skeleton man with a shield and machete appeared in Alpha's base. The flickering sword was raised high, and it quickly slashed at the mutants around him. The sudden change made the selected mutant unable to react. Just when everyone thought bloodshed was about to happen the next moment, the skeleton man rose into midair without warning. The big knife in his hand swung wildly, but he couldn't touch even a single person. And Li Wang also slowly appeared in the crowd. He waved his hand to signal everyone to stay away, and everyone naturally retreated obediently. And the next moment, the skeleton man slammed to the ground as if he had been oppressed by some force. A ball of flames descended from the sky, and within an hour or 3/4, bursts of powder floated into the distance. Turning slightly sideways, Jimmy dodged the arrows that were shot at him rapidly. Although Jimmy is not afraid of being shot by this arrow. However, if you can escape, why do you have to suffer that flesh and blood? Jimmy is not the kind of shaking turn sideways, dodge step. Shanbu, who was born out of Shunpo but higher than Shunpo, played an undeniable role in this one. In the next instant, Jimmy appeared in front of Varna. And this process didn't even take a second. How strong do you think Jimmy will be after 3 months of life and death struggle? The bone claws came out quickly, and Jimmy had no intention of showing mercy to the people in hell. Naturally, the existence of Jimmy and hell is a hostile relationship. Moreover, Jimmy is not the kind of person who likes to negotiate. Bone claws protruded, Varna's eyes narrowed slightly, and the longbow in her hand was raised. Hold Jimmy's claw firmly. Not only that, but the strength contained in the longbow can be described as full. Not only held Jimmy's bone claws, but also opened Jimmy's empty door. Stabbing forward without hesitation, the edge of the longbow was a sharp blade, piercing into Jimmy's body without the slightest suspense. The longbow turned sharply, and even the blade in Jimmy's body turned for a while. Ah. The intense pain stimulated Jimmy's nerves, and he gritted his teeth tightly. A faint golden light appeared all over Jimmy's body. Instead of advancing, he retreated. He leaned forward sideways, and the standard iron mountain leaned against Varna's chest. With a loud noise and the sound of bones breaking, Varna flew upside down. Varna never thought until she died that she could fight back even after being so seriously injured. Jimmy didn't intend to pursue, and the cruel woman died at that moment. The whole process was very short, not even a minute. Life and death were already separated. At this time, the longbow was still in Jimmy's body, and it was constantly emitting cold air, preventing the self-healing factor from healing. Pulling out the longbow, Jimmy leaned against the tree weakly. In fact, such an injury is nothing to Jimmy at all. However, the severe pain kept stirring Jimmy's nerves. Why can't I read the gas mask? Jimmy stared blankly at the bright moon in the sky. Slowly getting up from the ground, Jimmy glanced at Varna's body. After hesitating for a moment, he stepped forward and touched it. Of course, it's not that Jimmy has any special hobby. Anyone who has played online games knows that this is picking up equipment. In the end, Jimmy only found a dagger. The whole body of the dagger is black, even under the moonlight, there is no reflection at all. Excellent assassination weapon. After putting away the dagger and the longbow made of the same material, Jimmy rushed back towards the base. Soon, Jimmy was back on base. Forehead, once back at base, Jimmy sees the last thing he wanted to see. Beside the scorching bonfire, Mel was chatting and laughing happily with the young and handsome Iceman and fireman. At that moment, Jimmy couldn't tell what he was feeling in his heart. It's a little sour, and it feels like someone else has taken something from me. He wanted to go forward and say something, but Jimmy found that he had nothing to do with Mel. Jimmy returned to the base, and Mel, who was chatting enthusiastically, didn't notice. Mel is busy right now. Mel's own capital is undoubtedly strong. The typical fair-skinned and beautiful long-legged, his personal charm has reached the full level. Jimmy has now pushed himself into the position of leader, although he is still only a queen in name. But Mel was also ambitious. Mel's ultimate goal is to engage the devil. Jimmy's sentence will go to hell, and Mel doesn't just agree verbally. Therefore, even though he has Jimmy who supports him, his own strength is already the most influential in this seemingly incongruous organization. However, this is not enough. Mel wants to make this organization completely hers. These top combat powers, whether they are Magneto or King of Power. For Mel, it is very easy to defeat or even kill them. Mel's fighting style is similar to that of Jimmy, and it is also the kind of fighting for 1 minute, and life and death in 1 minute. Mel knew this fact, so Magneto and the others naturally knew it too. But Magneto still has a lot of confidence to speak. Because Magneto knows that Mel needs people, living mutants. And Magneto has nearly 100 mutants under his command. And Mel naturally knew what he needed. That's why Mel wins over these two Icemen and firemen who are obviously interested in him. Only when enough people are attracted, then Mel can gain enough right to speak. Only then can those mutants who don't know anything become their loyalists later. At that time, whether it is Magneto or Li Wang, they will be powerless. There is no choice but to be loyal. As for actually being with one of Iceman or Pyro. Don't be kidding, this is just a way of imperial power. It would be fine if they were good enough, but, in reality, they are not. Whether it's appearance or strength, in Mel's eyes, they are far behind Jimmy. The strength of the current mutants has not been graded. However, it is easy to distinguish which is strong and which is weak. For Mel, Iceman, Fireman, Magneto and Liwing, these are all instant kills for him. But Jimmy, Mel is no match. Mel's way of fighting is, start the battle, get beaten, absorb energy, almost, teleport, instant kill. Therefore, whether it is Magneto, King of Power or Iceman and Fireman, they will not be Mel's opponent. But Jimmy only needs 1 kick to break Mel's absorption ceiling. Proper violent output is unreasonable. As for the appearance, this is a matter of opinion for the beholder. Jimmy doesn't think so much. Jimmy only knows that he is very unhappy now. Very, very unhappy. The dagger in his hand was stained with Jimmy's sweat. Jimmy originally wanted to give the dagger he got to Mel. But the situation in front of him, Jimmy was very tangled. Moreover, that longbow Jimmy also intends to give to the Iceman. Because this longbow Jimmy also intends to give to the Iceman. Winning hearts and minds is what Jimmy intends to do. But the difference with Mel is that Jimmy doesn't have such big ambitions, he just wants to pave the way for Mel. After all, Jimmy's heart has never been completely put in this alpha organization. Compared with the dangers they will face in the future, a single mutant organization is not enough.